comparison to single-use, but it enables a broader production output with less pressure on limited resources.
The Arctic marine ecosystem holds abundant biomass, vital for fish, and a potential food source for humans. Collaboration amongst fishermen, policymakers, and researchers can ensure sustainable, multi-use harvesting of these resources.
Sorry. Good morning, everyone. In here, I'm like that excited, about the second day at Arctic Frontiers 2025. It seems the location reference worked. You all found your way into the room again. So thank you very much for being here again with us to a second day full of discussions, full of Arctic-related discussions, and hopefully bringing those discussions into a broader global perspective. Again, I'm here for the important things, talking about emergency exit for those who haven't been here. There are emergency exits. Please, if there is an alarm, follow those. Talking about questions, we have an app, and if you have questions to the panelists, which Rita can then ask them, please use the app, and then we have a little iPad, and Rita can read them out and answer your questions. Today's session is all about the ocean, and then we get back to security, so you see the connection here between both the marine use of oceans and the security issues related to that. Rita, your first day in the Arctic, what did you learn yesterday?
So far, so good. I mean, it's been an enlightening and refreshing experience to be here physically in Tromsø. As you know, my first taste of the Arctic. So besides the crash course in Arctic affairs, it's been really fascinating for me to see up close the beautiful landscape and to hear firsthand from so many stakeholders here on stage and off stage, across cultures and generations, about the issues that really define the region, the issues that concern the people living here, and how we all work in a collaborative way to chart a path forward, looking for solutions to the key challenges.
And there's way more to discuss, so thank you very much for guiding us through the second day as well.
I'll take on the less important task of guiding us through. Thank you so much, Andreas. And good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you once again as we embark on this big picture session, which looks at the Arctic Ocean multi-use for multi-gain. Now, with the ocean fast becoming the new epicenter of global attention, the race is on to exploit its resources, from energy extraction to fisheries. There's increased tourism, which all means that there's a surge, as you know, in activity that is turning Arctic waters into a congested arena where competing interests, let's face it, often collide. So we must ask ourselves, can we develop the Arctic's resources without inflicting irreversible damage on its fragile ecosystems? Are we prepared to implement collaborative governance systems and safeguards that not only prioritize environmental health, but also put at the center of the policies that we implement human needs? Are we on a path to repeating the same exploitative mistakes that have plagued other industries and sectors, or can we do more and better? Many of the decisions that will be made today and in the next days, weeks, and months ahead will determine whether the Arctic Ocean becomes a model of sustainable multi-use for multi-gain, or a cautionary tale of unchecked exploitations. So as we engage in this discussion, let's challenge ourselves to think outside the box, beyond traditional paradigms, to break down the silos, and to commit to a holistic approach that ensures the health of our oceans and the prosperity of all of its peoples. I will need your help and your input, so please do keep your questions coming, as Andreas just mentioned, through the Arctic Frontiers app. But first, as the ocean space gets more and more crowded, how do we make the most efficient use of the sea? Here's some food for thought.
The ocean is a shared resource. It supports industries, ecosystems, and communities. And we need to find better ways of working together to keep the ocean healthy. Since 2020, the Center for the Ocean and the Arctic has been working on multi-use at sea, or marine business park, as we call it. In 2023, we presented policy recommendations suggesting that we need to plan for multi-use from the outset, including it in national policies and marine industry plans and in other important processes. One key idea, which we just discussed at a side event just before this big picture session, is that multi-use can free up more space, and this space can be used for new conservation areas, moving us closer to the 30 by 30 goal. In addition, multi-use offers many benefits. It can allow for a more circular economy by using shared resources like energy. In addition, it can promote a more nature-positive outcome by, for example, growing algae in a wind farm, then offsetting the carbon footprint of the wind farm. Right now, the Centre is testing Norway's regulatory framework to see if there are anything in our regulations that are hindering industries from co-locating at sea. We are doing this through 3 realistic case studies. Finally, we need to balance environmental care with economic growth in order to achieve healthy oceans and unlocking the full potential of the ocean for the future. I think we can do this by finding new ways of working together. Thank you.
So how do we achieve this delicate balance? It's my pleasure to invite to the stage our panelist, Marianne Næss, who is Minister of Fisheries and Ocean Policy of Norway, Dennis Holm, Minister of Fisheries and Infrastructure in the Faroe Islands, Dr. Kelsey Fraser, Associate Director for Research and Analysis at the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies, which is a U.S. Department of Defense regional center in Anchorage, Alaska. Please do take your seats. And then last but not least, Hilu Taguna, Senior Arctic Advisor at Oceans North Canada. Welcome to all of you. So we just heard quite a few important keywords there: nature positive, creating a circular economy, the issue of regulations, and so on. Minister Næss, Norway plays a leading role here in this domain with its extensive research on the oceans and its wide activities from shipping to fisheries. We know that Norway's ocean area is 6 times the size of its land mass. So from your perspective, first of all, just how vital is the ocean for Arctic nations like Norway, and how do you maximize its use and benefits?
Yes, first of all, I would say that the ocean means everything to us. It's our identity. We have lived by and off the ocean for generations, and that is what we're going to do the years to come as well. And we depend on the ocean when it comes to food, energy, and transportation. So and it also means a lot when it comes to our GDP. So we have to make sure that we take care of the ocean at the same time as we also have expectation to the existing industries in the ocean that they both adapt and evolve, and also at the same time we have to make sure that the new industries are have a way to use the ocean areas, which, yeah, you mentioned we have a lot of vast ocean areas, but at the same time we would like to have more proactive management of the ocean, because we know that there are going to be more conflicts in the future to come. So even though we have been good in securing coexistence since the 1970s, we know that as we need more food from the ocean, we need more energy, and also the ocean is have to be taken care of as itself. So we have to do better. So that's why we launched an ocean industry plan last year. And that plan includes 10 principles to make sure that we will do it even better the years to come. So one of the things I would like to highlight is the need for more knowledge about the ocean, and how to also have processes that includes all the different stakeholders in an early stage, so that we also are more inclusive and also are taking how do you say? We have to take the good decisions earlier in the process, so that we know about each other and all the challenges that are in the ocean.
To be more proactive,
right,
in the approach, and a holistic approach, as you say. And as you speak, and as we all know that the ocean is a vast expanse of natural resources. There's plentiful of space for everybody, but there's that increased competition as well. So going to one point that was made yesterday by one of the Arctic emerging leaders, how do you place collaboration over competition in this space?
I think collaboration is the key factor to succeed, because I think all of us, especially those who live by the sea and see how important it is, and for Norway it is really, really important, has been, are going to be in the future. We need to collaborate more.
But in practical terms, what
yeah,
does it
that's
mean?
why in the Ocean Industry Plan, one of the principles is to make sure that we both collaborate more, we share knowledge, and also we have going to establish this forum for coexistence, and that we also invite different stakeholders from the industry, from the government, from the all the stakeholders that are into the sea to meet regularly and also inform each other about different projects and what's do we have to think about when we are planning new industries.
Right. And learn from each other across borders.
And we have good examples, actually. We, as I said, we have been doing this since the 1970s. And there are projects, especially I would like to mention when it comes to offshore wind and the fisheries. They have been working together for a couple of 3-4 years now, especially when it comes to new projects for offshore wind. And of course, we have to continue that dialogue and those regular meetings, and also listen to the fisheries, I would like to say, also in this planning, especially important. And that is also one of the principles in the Ocean Industry Plan.
Minister Holm, what are the lessons that could be learned from an important player like Norway? I mean, the Faroe Islands are a small island nation with 55,000 inhabitants, but they're also a large ocean nation in the Arctic. It's an interesting perspective. But so traditionally based on fishing and the fishing industry, but how do you strike that balance between making sure that you are focusing on the ocean from multi-use and multi-gain, but also not forgetting about the people. So striking the right balance between business and people.
Yeah, that's our I think main point at this stage. Of course, we have the same themes that Norway are working with, but we cannot be compared in size with Norway, of course. But we are a small country, and most of our activity are near coastal activity when we talk multi-use and multi-gain in this term here. And we have different industries already actively in those areas, but we also see new interests in offshore wind farms, offshore farming, the use of tidal wave power production, and so on. But we cannot forget that people are still living there. So this balance between acknowledging that we have people living in the areas that like to enjoy the nature, the environment, and also thinking about industrial development and economic growth, that's a really, really narrow way to balance it. So that's the main focus at this point in the Faroes, that we are, how can we plan it to don't get these conflicts that definitely will come if we don't take this plan in an early stage and focus on how to do it together, because it's all about doing it together in the end.
What are the risks for you, and how important is the issue of overfishing, for example?
Yeah, of course, we have a large focus in the Faroes that we should focus more on sustainable fisheries than we have done earlier, and this has been a really important part of my job for the last 2 years, because we in the midst of the North Atlantic, the ocean is our foundation for our economy, salmon farming and fisheries. And if we don't think about the sustainable part of it, both the fisheries part of it, but also the sustainable part of salmon farming, both in the production side and the effects on nature, we cannot live in the future. So this is an investment in our own future. So sustainable thinking is the main path forward for us.
We'll talk more about your specific recommendations moving forward, but Dr. Kelsey Fraser, let me turn to you. As a security and defense researcher in Alaska, how does the picture differ from what you've heard?
Well, I think the ocean landscape for us in the North American part of the Arctic, and specifically in the U.S. part of the Arctic, is so young comparatively. We have a very different environment than what I'm blessed to be here experiencing today in Norway. So the ice is just beginning to recede. The changing environment around us means that now we're starting to have those conversations about, well, how do we use technology in this environment, how do we develop those energy resources that we haven't had an opportunity to do before? But it depends on cooperation and conversation with allies and partners to understand what are those best practices. So every time I get to come to a conference and listen to the amazing researchers and professionals in the audience, I get a little piece of, well, this is what worked in Norway, this is what worked in Finland, this is how we did things really well. So that as I go back to the United States, as I go back to Alaska, I can say, hey, there's merit in this. This has been done before. Let's have a conversation together.
But beyond the conversation, are there examples that you feel can work, can be transported from one Arctic to the next?
Absolutely. And those really rely on just kind of strategic partnerships. Now, understand that I'm a security researcher, so my perspective is definitely on that side of the front. So when we look at programs that have started to develop in multi-use or dual-use infrastructure, most of the examples I can give you are that military-civilian cooperation. And we have a few of those. The sound surveillance system that was put in place really during World War II was for military use. We were tracking submarines. But we figured out, hey, we can also look at whale migration. We can look at fish migration. We should probably be listening to underwater seismic activity so that we're feeding into disaster response mechanisms. And that's what gives me hope, that we're now starting to have conversations about, hey, this technology we used strictly for military applications has a civilian application in safety. How do we marry those two together? And so as we progress in our conversation today, those are the examples that I'll give you, because those are the ones that I have hope for in the future.
So military technologies with good potential dual use.
Absolutely.
For multi-gain, as we say, with benefits.
Correct. I mean, GPS, for example, was for military intent, but we have it in our watches and our phones now. I use it to navigate Trump, so when I get lost. So I'm grateful that we're having more conversations. How do we build partnerships? And not just within the U.S., for military to civilian, but even military to military, civilian population to civilian population, indigenous to indigenous. How do we continue that conversation and grow that technology for everyone's safety?
How do we build partnerships and trust?
Yes.
Across sectors, which brings me to you, Hilu Taguna. Indigenous communities traditionally have been seen, I know you see them as the stewards of the Arctic. They have the knowledge of the land and the ocean. Minister, you spoke about the importance of knowledge earlier and tapping into it. Are indigenous communities fundamentally best placed to advise on how to develop the oceans industries and fisheries and anything that goes into the ocean and out of it?
Thank you. Yes, coming from the Canadian Arctic as an Inuk, I'd first like to thank everyone for having me here. I come from a Caribou Inuit, and so seeing the importance of the reindeer in Ramsa provides a kinship feeling to me. I think it's critical as we move into multi-use of these Arctic oceans that we need to consider the importance of sustaining the Arctic for the people that live in the area, and that there's knowledge, and that is critical to the work that we do. As interests continue to move forward and industry moves forward, we need to understand that as it expands into Arctic waters, that legislation and policy is that we all rely on these Arctic oceans. And so industrial activity cannot come at the cost of the people that live there and the ecosystems that sustain the people that live there. This activity must prioritize safety and respect of these ecosystems. Arctic peoples have historically lived without borders, and so does the waters and the marine animals that live in these waters. They transcend the lines of borders. And so as we move forward, I think it's important to recognize times when indigenous Arctic people participated, and then that is critical to any work that we're going to do as we continue in this field.
Do you feel that there is a genuine push towards deeper participation from the indigenous communities? Are you being given a real seat at the table, not just to listen, but to contribute to making sound decisions?
Consultation alone has never been acceptable. It is important that Arctic indigenous people have a seat at the table and help create these legislations and policies as we move forward. Examples of that are the Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement and also the Pikkealassuksuaq Commission, where Arctic indigenous people had a part to play in creating those agreements, and those are success stories that we have. We must continue to ensure that Arctic peoples have the resources and tools so that they can participate in the impact assessments and the creation of policies, and that their knowledge base is contributing to these new policies.
Just briefly, what safeguards would you put in place if it came to legislations? I wonder, when you hear Dr. Kelsey speak about military activity and defense technologies, does it make you nervous?
Well, no, I don't think that it makes me nervous. I just think participation is key. Examples of that can be having acoustic monitoring in places, but having the communities that are involved give best examples of where does acoustic monitoring need to occur.
Speaking of acoustics.
Yeah.
Yes.
Continue? Yes.
Drum rolls, yes. Oops. Ooh, maybe it's a sign. No, go
Okay.
on.
Yeah.
One more time.
Yes. Quite distracting, sorry. But yes, Indigenous participation is key, and centrality of that is key as we move forward in this.
Minister, your thoughts on this?
Yes, actually I grew up in Hammerfest, which used to be the northernmost town in the world, and also a lot of indigenous people, and me myself is yeah. And I think it's very important, of course, to have processes that includes everyone, all stakeholders, and also, of course, indigenous peoples. We have in Norway Sametinget. That is very important for us when it comes to when we take decisions to consult. But of course, I think for me, as an inhabitant who lives in the north, in the Arctic, my biggest concern is the demographic challenges, that we are getting less and less people living here. So to take care of our Arctic regions, we have to make sure that we both have a livelihood and that we have jobs. We have to find the balance between taking care of like the reindeer herding, and at the same time we need energy, we need to new industries, and we have to take care of existing industries. So I think it's very complex, and it's always finding this right balance. And as I said, when it comes to the ocean industry plans, for us it is very important to make sure that we have processes that are inviting in all the interest groups and stakeholders in an early stage, so that we make sure that we have all the information, and at least we have to make sure that we have all the knowledge that we need to take the decision that is finding the right balance though, between taking care of all the interests that are definitely existing. Yeah.
And how important is innovation, Mr. Holm, for you? I mean, what kind of innovative project are we seeing in the Faroe Islands in the ocean industry?
Yeah, we see there's a lot of focus on, first, we see that businesses, they typically live their own livelihood, lives. They think their own lives, they think their own business. So we see a lot of businesses that are claiming spots on the ocean that they would like to expand. And of course, there are a lot of investments in innovation in the Faroes, where you want to, for example, regarding the salmon farming that in Norway and the Faroes are typically in the fjords. They are focusing on how can we do salmon farming on the ocean, on the more open ocean. And of course, this needs innovation and of course research, development, and so on. But the money in the salmon farming industry is so big that it's not difficult for them to do that. So when they are claiming a spot outside a very precious spot, a place for nature and for bird life, you also touch upon the communities that live in the area. So as Minister Ness she talks about, it's really important to at an early stage to set the stage how to talk about these stuff. How do we proceed forward that all stakeholders are at the table and not just the money of it? I think that's really important. And I do agree that to live in a place, you also need a job, and to attract younger people, you also need good jobs. So there's a fine balance in how to run a business and how to run a community.
Yeah. It's important, again, people-centered approach. How do you keep the people living there? How do you keep them looking at a sustainable future? A question from the audience for you, Hilu. How can indigenous peoples be more involved in conservation management? Do you have any examples that you can share?
I think the participation will come from having indigenous people and Inuit as a marine people participating in things like developing their own baseline research, participating in sitting at the tables where you can have indigenous knowledge participating, included, and that information is critical to developing policies. And not only that, even when industry wants to be there and be successful, there are ways for Arctic peoples and industry to work together. Is there, for example, notice to mariners or information to tourism industry on where is best not to go, because perhaps that's where the marine animals are calving, belugas are calving. That's just an example, and that's a success story that can happen. Is there, as an example, another example, like, is there an area where shipping can slow down so that the nesting of migratory birds is not disrupted, and harvesting for Inuit and indigenous people can still occur? There have been great examples of where collaboration like that has happened. And the other example of Pikialasoksoak and Canadian Inuit and Greenlandic Inuit working together to protect a shared water system in the North Water Polynia, and establishing a shared management system in the future will be beneficial. These are direct examples, and they can continue to happen. I believe it hasn't happened enough, but it can continue to happen with the help of people like the ones that are sitting here before us.
Yeah. Collaboration among indigenous communities. To Dr. Kelsey again, collaboration among nations on either side of the Arctic. You mentioned earlier that when you come to Norway and other places like this here in Europe, there are ideas that strike you that you take back to Alaska, whether they are implementable out there or not.
Sure.
What about if we flipped it the other way? I mean, what are some of the most relevant case studies from the North American perspective that can actually be utilized here in Europe?
Well, I think there's always an opportunity for increased conversation and collaboration. We're young developmentally in some of those areas, and I recognize that. The areas I think that, from my perspective, we're strongest in is understanding that security and security technology doesn't have to just be security. Now, I would also argue that most of my European colleagues recognize that. So I don't know if it's central to a North American theme, but being able to identify challenges, being able to identify communities where we need to start having more conversations. Those are things that I think that we do very well in the North American Arctic. And to the minister's point earlier about communities, about community jobs, about building a sense of togetherness and keeping people in the region, part of the challenge there is also driving innovation. And we spend a lot of time at conferences saying, hey, there's a problem. Now the next step is, hey, there's a solution. And I'm always excited to get back to Alaska, get back home, and see that innovation that's driving. And I think for all of us that live in Arctic communities, we recognize that we're tasked with innovation. We must innovate in order to survive, and that's what we're really good at. So as I look to my colleagues here in Norway and Northern Europe and all of the beautiful Arctic countries I get to visit, I'm always looking for what's the innovation spark that you have? What's the innovation spark that I can share and say, hey, why don't we figure this out together?
Figuring it out together, I mean, that's the theme, really, of how we can move forward together across boundaries. A question from the audience that I'd like to go to, and please keep those coming. I only have two that I can go to, but one of them is this. We speak of economic possibilities in the ocean. For example, change in sea ice in the Arctic can make new shipping routes. Mm-hmm. But isn't this a time where we should be looking into preserving nature and not exploiting it even further? Both ministers, whoever likes to take it first.
Yeah. I think we are able to have two thoughts in mind at the same time. So, of course, we have to take care of the ocean and the marine environment. That is the success for all the other things to come. So if we don't succeed there will be problems in the years to come. So, but of course, the ocean is very important, also when it comes to transportation. So that is why we have to, as I said, we have to think how we can secure this coexistence. And that means that we have to have a careful planning and a robust regulatory frameworks. And we have to have these principles, how we're going to develop the activities in the ocean for the future.
How do we do it, though?
Yeah, how do we do it? We do have experience. Yeah.
How do you put together in place these regulatory frameworks that are lacking?
For one example, we have the Center for Ocean and Arctic are actually at the time having this pilot. They are seeing into different scenarios how we can have multi-use of the ocean areas. Mm-hmm. And that is something we for me to follow up when they have their conclusions, and how we have to do more research, and we have to know more about the ocean and how possibilities there are. And also I think it is important to have in mind that it also have to benefit both the industry and the society when we are talking about multi-use. So there are some economic aspects into this as well. So we have to use the areas more effective, and we have to make sure that we have the data and the information and the knowledge-based decisions from now on.
I hate to put you on the spot, but here's a follow-up from the audience. You know, right now Norway is losing Arctic biodiversity at a rate like never before. So what is the minister's plan to protect the changing Arctic? Will Norwegian politicians act before it's too late?
As I said, I would like Norway is quite good when it comes to taking care of the ocean environment, but of course the development is not going the right direction, so we have to do more. And that is why we also are looking how to present a new act. That is how to be able to do more conservation of the ocean areas in the years to come. So the government is working on it, and of course, as with many things, you would like to do it, made it done yesterday, but I think it's important to make sure that we do it in a way that we succeed to have all the knowledge and data that we need to identify what areas that we could conserve for the future.
Minister Holm, I mean, I would love to hear your take, but if I can just add a thought from the audience as well to you, in addition, is someone is saying their country, France, has difficulty in renewing the workforce in the fisheries. Can you give us your take on your realities vis-à-vis the attractiveness of fishing jobs in the Faroe Islands?
Yeah, I think that we have a bit of the same challenges. It's also a part of it is also about economy. In the Faroe Islands, the part of the fishing fleet that has good pay, good jobs economically, they don't have any difficulty in attracting young, typically men, mostly men working in the fishing ships. But of course, that part of the fishing fleet that doesn't make much money. We also see an import of or incoming foreigners to those jobs. But mainly the jobs on board ships in the Faroes where you have an education, they're typically Faroese. So we see a small change. We've seen it over the last 5-6 years. But in that part where the economy is good, the pay is good, and you have Faroese crews, yeah.
What small changes or big changes would you like to see, Hiru?
I imagine that some best practices would be having more stewardship of Arctic peoples to these areas that contributes to the baseline data, having Arctic peoples included in research, and not only included, but formulating it, deciding on what needs to be researched in order to prepare, having protected areas that are very clear and defined, and ensuring that other measures that are like protection measures are included and already established prior to development. With warming waters already occurring and ice loss already occurring, this needs to be at the forefront of any decision making.
For you, what do protective measures look like?
Well, I wanted to go back to the first question and challenge the individual that asked, between conservation and exploitation. That's kind of a spectrum. Is there a spot in between? Have we truly defined what it means to be exploitative or conserve? Or is there a way to find that middle ground where, yes, we're protecting our environment, but we're also able to make use of that? If we had a really good definition that the current Arctic 7 in the room, Arctic 8 maybe one day, could come to an agreement on, that would be profound in our ability to implement policy, but we don't have something that, we've come together and said, yes, the Arctic is important. We recognize where it needs to go. We recognize that we want to retain biodiversity. We want to retain jobs. This is the left and right limit of that so that we can move forward. I think what I listen to all the time is this struggle internally by everyone over how are we going to achieve this, but we haven't gotten back to fundamentally what's the definition between conservation, exploitation, and where we'd like to be.
Do we need one, though? Isn't it quite obvious?
I don't think so. Because if I were to ask everyone in this room, I'm going to get at least 20 different definitions of what that means.
It's subjective.
Very much so, where you come from.
And where states come from, Minister.
I would like to highlight an example how to find the balance between, as you said, conservation and exploitation, and how to use the ocean areas. Because when I was, before I went to Parliament, I was a mayor in Hammerfest. And then there was an ocean called Lopphavet. It's an ocean where there was supposed to be conservation, and actually the communities that was surrounded around this area was really concerned, because if we were going for the plans that was presented, it meant that a lot of the activities that has been there for generation was not supposed to continue in the future. So how to make sure that we have a livelihood and that we take care of both the ocean but also the people living there and their jobs. And that is also one of the first things. When I got to Parliament, I was together with the Minister for Climate and Environment, together with the new mayors, visiting him. And they had this dialogue and actually listen to each other and work together. They find a solution how to both conserve and protect the areas, and at the same time make sure that there are still jobs opportunities in the future. So I think dialogue, a meeting and listening, and before you conclude, and also of course knowledge is again the answers.
Being honest and also having the political will. Minister Holm,
Yes.
before you became minister and part of the government, what would have been your recommendations? And now that you are, have they been met? In other words, are governments putting their money where their mouth is? You know, we hear all of the good, wonderful statements, but do they actually act on the recommendations that the people have in mind?
Yeah, I think that what I see in Norway and Iceland and the Faroes, the country that I know most of, is that we are really working up trying to prevent a clash between different interests. And I think that's a really important part. But another part that we also need to address is that we see there's an increased traffic in the North Atlantic, and also with the ocean, with the possibility of northern routes. We are really small countries, Faroes, Shetland, and Scotland is there also, and Iceland. Norway is much bigger, but we see an increased traffic in this part of the world, in the North Atlantic, and we are not able to if there happens a disaster, for example, in Faroese water, we are not able to do it alone. So this also calls for collaboration between the countries when it comes to safety and also in protecting nature and environment in the future. So we have a setup that is good enough if a disaster happens. So some parts of it concerns our own countries, but we also need to look outside also and connect with our neighbors to deal with these challenges that are ahead. And they are increasing each day. We see it in the Faroes, you see it in Norway and Iceland, and you probably also see it in the other parts of the Arctic.
As an astute politician, I notice you haven't really answered the question. Recommendations in the sense, what are they? What were they when you weren't in government? What are they today?
There weren't any plans. There weren't any marine spatial planning in the Faroes. We need to do that. I think that's a really important tool to bring forward. Yeah.
Let's close with your final thoughts. Looking forward with a crystal ball. Dr. Kelsey, I mean, first of all, what would you like to see happen? What is missing from the discussion, and what should... again, it's not just up to governments, isn't it? It's a collaborative effort between the private, the public sector. What is missing? What would you like to see?
I would love to see more dialogue and communication on the security implications, not only for national level, but community level in energy resilience. And coming from a state where, if you look at the state of Alaska newspapers, if you look at what our current struggle is, we have one primary energy source. And we don't know if we're going to have rolling blackouts during the summer or not. We're not quite sure if we have enough gas. There's gas out there, but we're not quite sure if that'll continue. And so if that hits the largest city in the United States portion of the Arctic, what must our smaller communities be struggling with? And so I'd like to have more dialogue and communication about what energy resilience means. How do we get there? How do we continue to develop that, especially in our very young opening up portion of that Arctic? As the ice retreats, what can we do to really shore up not only our communities, but anyone that might be transiting through?
In a nutshell or two, Hilu.
That Arctic indigenous people are best placed to participate in these spaces, and that we must be included in these governance structures for all of our benefit. That although use and gain are big terms that we're using even in this panel that we're sitting on right now, we must remember what we need to do to give back to that space. The waters of the Arctic are vast, but they aren't an infinite resource, and we need to work together to protect as we use and gain from these waters. Thank you.
Thanks, Hilu. And if you aren't given the space, how will you demand a bigger say?
We continue to demand. I think it's never been simple to participate in these spaces, and we continue to advocate and fight for Arctic peoples to sit at these tables, and we'll continue to do so.
By standing firm. Minister, to you, your key takeaways. What does the future look like, and how do you actually make this more inclusive?
Yeah, I agree with both of those speakers before me when it comes to dialogue and communication, and also that we have to I would like to say for the Arctic is quite different from where you are in the world as well. So I think that is also important to have in mind, because for me, as I told you, I grew up in Hammerfest in the Arctic, where we have both oil and gas, and we have fisheries, and we have aquaculture, and we have the need of energy. And I think the perspectives when it comes to security is going to be maybe the most important thing for the future. How to make sure that we can still live here for generations to come. And then we have to find the balance between, both developing existing industries, they have to evolve and adapt, and we also have to put on the framework and the groundwork for new industry, like carbon capture and storage, offshore aquaculture and wind. And these questions are not very easy, I would like to say, because you can see the debate when it comes how much, not everyone agree that we need more energy, for instance. So just have this common knowledge base. Where are we? What are we heading? And what are the challenges that are meeting us? And how to solve them. So we have to have much more dialogue and knowledge-based.
And briefly, the dialogue, I mean, amongst yourselves, but how important is the dialogue outside of the Arctic as well?
Of course, it's very important also to understand how different the Arctic is and how we depend on each other to go further on. So, we have to collaborate. Yesterday we had a very nice day together. Norway and the Faroe is collaborating excellently. So we have to continue work with our neighbors and with the EU and so on to make sure that we can solve all the challenges that are in front of us.
A common challenge and something that would benefit not just the Arctic but the entire world. So for you, Minister, your final thoughts on this and just how confident you are about the tools at our disposal, the knowledge and the political will.
Yeah, I think we agree on some main themes. The dialogue is important and the balance is important. And that this balance between having the right knowledge of what are we moving into, that's an important part, the nature environment part, and the balance between business development and community development. So I think the dialogue is always the key. We know that in advance, but how do we do it? That's the question. So the setup needs to be there to foster the dialogue.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you to all of our panelists for a fascinating discussion. Thank you. And as I invite you to take your seats, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you. As our first set of panelists take their seats in the audience, we will move into our next heat or our next panel discussion along the same lines of what we've just been saying, but with 4 different players. And if I could please invite you all to join me on stage. Please welcome Charlina Vicheva, Director General of DG Mare at the European Commission, Bente Pretlov, Vice President and Program Director for Food and Ocean Systems in Norway, Joel Lindholm, CEO of Unerstan, a startup focusing on cultivation and ecosystem enhancing restoration services and techniques, and last but not least, Dr. Brigitte Vlasvinkel. I'll go with Dr. Brigitte Vlasvinkel, Head of Environment and Sustainability at the Oceans of Energy, which aims to provide offshore solar energy worldwide. Thank you and welcome to you all. So let's begin with Charlina Vicheva. So the European Commission, as we often hear, plays a pivotal role in shaping maritime policy, putting in place some of the regulations. How do you, based on what you've just heard, how do you ensure that the push for a blue economy doesn't compromise the ecological integrity of the Arctic Ocean, especially in light of what we've been saying is a surge of activity in the oceans?
Thank you very much. And since I'm talking to a big audience now, I would like to thank very much Norway for hosting this very important Arctic Forum. This is one of the most important Arctic fora, so it's always a pleasure to be here. It's my second time. And it's always nice to encounter again a very like-minded Arctic community with a lot of strides to balance out the unbalanceable sometimes, but I think that we managed. On the side of the European Union, so we have Arctic states. They participate in many fora, in the Arctic Council, in the Nordic Council of the Ministers. The European Commission is actually having the power to convene, the power to regulate. And when we talk about ocean and blue economy, we are quite advanced there, and already more than 10 years ago we realized that we need tools, because everybody was quite in agreement that we need to balance, we need to achieve both conservation goals and enablers for the blue economy, but the how and the enabling tools are very important. So what we did as European Commission, we more than 10 years ago, we proposed, and it was adopted, a Maritime Spatial Planning Directive. And since then, we actually have 20 national maritime spatial plans out of the 22 coastal states. And it takes time, but the idea behind was to bring a tool, this planning tool that will bring communities to cooperate, and everybody highlighted how important it is to engage with all stakeholders, everyone that has a bearing to the sea and the ocean, no matter whether conservationists, NGOs, or actors of blue economy. So we had this in mind. The other thing is to really provide the best tool not to allow clashes at sea. Clashes not in terms of real physical clashes, but clashes of interests. So when you plan in advance the presence of the various blue economy sectors, then you give also transparency to the process, predictability, and safe way of allocating in a true business model the blue economy that we desperately need. At that time, it was not so much visible that we will need a multiplication of the blue economy. I was speaking this morning that we as European Union have a very ambitious goal to become carbon neutral in 2050. And we can't manage it if we don't multiply by a factor of 30 our capacity. It's now less because it increased, of offshore wind, for example, offshore solar. So now it's even more important that we think in advance, we plan in advance, we engage in advance. And if we talk about multi-use, one of the questions was why we don't go so much in an amplified manner to multi-use. It is because it needs work in advance. Many of the projects for multi-use that we have in our compendium, and I really recommend that you go into the interactive space on multi-use that we prepared. So the compendium shows practices of multi-use. They are by design. And I will give only one example to show that it is not possible to have one and the other, and then we ensure multi-use. No, it needs upfront thinking. There is a very nice French project, which is offshore wind combined with small-scale fisheries. It was possible only because the windmills were placed 1 kilometer at least distance between each other. So if you don't think in advance about small-scale fisheries, you will not be able to multi-use.
But so if you could give one example of one of the projects that the EU has funded, one of the many projects you funded for multi-use projects, what would it be? And how does it balance that, precarious notion of ocean health and economic opportunities and the increasing shipping, which means also an increasing carbon footprint? You mentioned climate.
Right. So on one hand, we have a very ambitious plan for decarbonization. And lately we started in my Directorate General, Energy Transition for Fisheries, and not only fisheries but also aquaculture, but we have equally ambitious plan for decarbonization of maritime transport. My other colleague, Director General of DG Move. So decarbonization is one thing that we finance, and we try to enable as much as we can. And as an enabler, we have, for example, Blue Invest, which helps startups in sustainable blue economy solutions. But if I have to give one example, it was given this morning, but it was a smaller audience, with Horizon Europe, which is the biggest research program in the world, which is with international scale, we actually financed a multi-use where you have offshore solar, offshore wind, and aquaculture, which is regenerative. So in a way, you have, because what is the final goal? To have blue economy that is environment friendly, and we heard it in the video this morning, but also a regenerative blue economy. So if we can combine all these into a multi-use project, that is the best we can have.
If only it were so simple. Let's look at the forecast, though, because Bente Pretlov, you've been responsible for several blue economy forecasts. What do they tell you?
That's right. Yeah, so I come from DNV, which is an assurance and risk management company, and we decided to develop these forecasts to basically understand the blue economy a bit better, to look at the interactions between the ocean industries, but not only the interactions between the industries, but also the interactions between them and the natural environment. And so I can bring up a few sort of big numbers just to set the scene here for the discussion. By modeling the blue economy and looking at growth towards 2050, we see that we're going to have a 5-fold increase in demand for space by 2050. And what does 5-fold mean? So for Europe, that would be about 67,000 square kilometers. But again, what does that mean in a huge ocean? Now, then you need to look at what is actually the available space. And the available space is set by criteria like depth, how close to the shore, how close to critical infrastructure, and also the fact that nature claims space itself, hence the 30 by 30 goal. So we got to look at available space, and just again for Europe. So for Europe, it's about 67,000 square kilometers in total. But if you look at taking some of those criteria into account, 50 kilometers from shore, for example, less than 50 meters, then actually food and energy, fixed infrastructure, is going to cover about 23% of the available space. So then you start understanding why we have to move towards these shared solutions, multi-use, shared resources and infrastructure and so on that we are discussing here.
And again, the word trust comes to mind, one that we focused on yesterday from the outset of this conference. You mentioned DNV, Der Norsk Veritas, Veritas Trust. So the question is, how do risk management companies create that trust?
So when we talk about trust, we need to have, trust was mentioned yesterday as well. And another very important message came from the minister earlier as well, is the knowledge bases. So there's a need for trust in the knowledge bases so that we actually convene around that. Then there is a need for trust in the technologies. Do they work as intended? Do they give us the outcomes that we expect? So, and to actually, for us, what we work with to actually try to achieve that trust, beyond things that have been mentioned now around stakeholder dialogues, extremely important, having openness and transparency around data and sharing of data, very important. But what is extremely important in addition to this is having standards and assurance standards that can actually tell us what do we actually expect and how can we monitor in relation to those expectations.
Joel Lindem, a CEO of a company operating in the Arctic marine environment. What do these standards look like for you?
Yeah, I would say for me, working in innovation in the Baltic Sea, these standards are not set yet. We are actually creating the standards in a way. So therefore, the dialogue is going to be really important when we are moving further on in this field of actually working with multi-gain in multi-use. What we are developing now is ecosystem enhancing services in the field of multi-use, which means that we want to add biodiversity or ecosystems in one way or another, or strengthen habitats on offshore wind foundations and scour protections. And this has not really been done yet. So this is a dialogue that we have to start now if we want to actually build multi-use for 2030 in a way. Whilst at the same time we have to trial these techniques to see if they are can be verified in one way or another, as well as that we get the that we fulfill the target that we are setting for ourselves. Hence, we also have to consider how will the different climate scenarios affect these kind of business and ecosystems moving forward. So how does the insurance look like in a way at the same time? It
sounds like a lot of experimenting still with nature, with our futures, the futures of Arctic communities. I wonder how you see that sort of balance, the enhancement of ecosystems and biodiversity on the one hand, and the business model on the other. I mean, for you, do you see cost or do you see opportunity in all of this?
From my side, going into this field, we say that we are striving to become a regenerative company. We can't be that yet. That's something that's really interesting when we are talking about regenerative companies, that many of us working in this field can't become it yet, because we have to look into can our suppliers provide us with regenerative materials, for example. If I if I want to build a seaweed farm in the Baltic Sea, I can't get hemp ropes at the moment that are locally produced. So then we have to start to work with innovation with someone else, or we might have to do it ourselves. So therefore we can only say that we are striving for this in one way or another when working in this field.
Dr. Brigitte, you do offshore solar, shall we say? I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, but many haven't. What do you mean by offshore solar in practical terms? What do you bring to the table when it comes to multi-use and multi-gain?
Good question. Thank you. Thanks for the invite also. It's good to be here. Yeah, I bring a different perspective. I bring the perspective from a Dutch technology developer. Oceans of Energy is the first company in the world that has successfully managed to operate an offshore solar farm in high seas, in high waves of the North Sea for more than 4 years now. Imagine, we've had waves up to 10 meter high. It's really quite incredible and quite a disruptive technology. And we see that offshore solar is really ideally suited for co-location with other blue economy activities, of course, especially with offshore wind. And this year we will install the first grid-connected offshore solar farm within a Dutch wind park operated by Shell and Eneco. So this brings just a whole new player into the field of renewable energy solutions. The Netherlands, small country, but also all the other EU countries, they really need to achieve this net zero energy systems by 2050. But it's really not, we're really falling short of the targets on the renewables. And that is because the space on land is limited, it's fragmented, especially in very densely populated coastal regions like the Netherlands, but also other places in Europe have issues with that. And onshore wind and solar have been met with growing opposition. NIMBY, not in my backyard. And so it has pushed, of course, the renewables offshore. And the wind sector has really developed this through successfully. But nobody would have thought of a wind turbine 20 years ago and placing them offshore and making sure that it's so cost effective as it is right now. Nobody had that in mind. And that's we see is also going to happen with offshore solar, because the offshore wind itself is not enough. I just heard that we need a factor 30 multiplication, and that we need a 5-fold increase in the manned space. That's for 2020. Yeah. So the sea space, but actually also the power export infrastructure, is still a limiting factor at sea, even though you think space at sea is limited. And also we kind of need to accelerate. So we need to basically pull everything from the closet and try to do everything together. And rolling out offshore wind at sea, but also rolling out offshore solar can go jointly, parallel, because it's not the same supply chain, it's not competitive. They are actually very complementary to each other, because when it's windy, it's usually not so sunny, and when it's sunny, it's usually not very windy, which means that you can basically use the same infrastructure that is already laid out there in the sea and push also solar electrons through the same export cable with the same infrastructure.
But can you push and accelerate, not just with the existing infrastructure, but with the existing mindset, keeping in mind that a lot of people aren't terribly familiar with offshore solar, and I understand that offshore wind farms are expanding in the Arctic, but you know, there are risks. You mentioned concerns briefly. I mean, there are also concerns that these developments could disrupt marine habitats and, in fact, the livelihoods of local communities. So can you push when people still have real concerns?
The beautiful thing about multi-use is that in the end, you can go to using less space at sea. And that's also the case for offshore solar. It is within the place of the wind parks. And, you know, for the Netherlands, there is a goal of 70 gigawatts of offshore wind to be installed in 2050. But that takes up like 20% of the Dutch North Sea. That's insane. I don't think the Dutch people realize that it's that much space. Well, if you move to more dense hybrid energy parks, you can actually much easier reach the goal of 30% nature restoration by 30. And the Dutch government really sees and understands that potential for offshore solar, because you need policies and you need a government that supports you. So the Dutch government has set the target of 3 gigawatts of offshore solar by 2030 in brownfields. And that has really helped. And they have also included it as a multi-use innovation winning criteria in the past 3 wind park tenders. So wind park operators kind of had to bring offshore solar in the game, whether they wanted or not, if they wanted to win the wind park tender. And that has proven very successful.
A Dutch project that has proven successful in the Netherlands, how adaptable would it be to the Arctic landscape and all of its unique factors?
That's a very good question. And I think that, again, comes a little bit back to, you know, we need to understand what these projects actually can achieve. And we need to be able to predict what they can achieve over time. So one thing is actually looking at the space here and now, have knowledge about the sort of historic sort of trends and so on, but we actually need to look to the future. So we need, and that's coming back to the knowledge bases. I think it's so important that we need to listen to the scientists. And we need to make the science actionable. So we need to translate this science into something which we can make decisions upon. And then we can start better understanding how we can kind of move these solutions to other parts of the world and whether they actually can achieve the same thing there. And then the final thing, we still have a lot of knowledge gaps. So we need to invest in research to close these knowledge gaps. And we're now halfway through the decade of ocean science. So I think we should really need to use that momentum to try to move science forward through research.
Is science being used enough these days? You mentioned predictability earlier. I mean, how much predictability can there be at sea? And how important is science to all of this?
I have to say that I didn't cover this very big part, I would say pillar, of whatever we do with to the ocean. It is important that it is supported by knowledge. We need informed policies. Because of this lack of knowledge, we invest a lot in science, and for the first time in the current Horizon Europe, which is this science and research program of the European Union, we have a dedicated Mission Ocean which invests in science research around a number of objectives. And one of our goals of Mission Ocean is to have a digital twin of the ocean, which should combine all the data. And we are quite rich in data because we have 2 important sources for covering to some extent the knowledge need for the ocean. So we have in situ data network, which is called EMODNet, and it exists more than 10 years now for standardized, interoperable data for the ocean. And on top, we have a layer of Earth observation via Copernicus. And I'm very happy that last year we managed to launch an Arctic hub of the Marine Service of Copernicus. And now we have this data for the Arctic. So this all data environment, when it is combined with modeling and other tools, artificial intelligence and other tools that can process this data, we can achieve a digital twin of the ocean that will give us enormous possibilities, not only to inform policies, but also to inform business decisions, multi-use, and anything that we do to the ocean. So the knowledge lag is absolutely essential. And I was very happy that throughout my meetings, I heard so many people, not necessarily from the European Union, because there are many Norwegians that are working on Horizon Europe projects. So this is the invigorating part of this community, that it really works together on science, research, and innovation in a very positive manner.
Do you see that collaboration? And how important is data sharing? I mean,
for us, it's everything. I would say our business needs data, and it needs collaboration with science as well. I think we did 1 year of research before we even started the company, because we didn't know what it should be. Should it be an organization? Should it be a project? And then we were focusing on seaweed as food, seaweed farming, but then also marine restoration. When we found marine restoration, that's when we knew that, okay, we will go for a company. And when we are working with science as a base of the business model in a way, and a way of creating revenue, and I have to add here as well, like the business model is me and us working with and for nature. So for nature is like the business model here. And when we start to look into different challenges, for example, overfishing in the Baltic Sea of Baltic herring, for example, then we know that, okay, we need to create more habitats for Baltic herring in one way or another. How do we achieve this? So we have to look down the food web in one way or another. And this is a field that I have been looking into now for almost a year, until I found a study recently looking into, okay, so certain kind of macroalgae will be interesting when the Baltic herring is spawning. Can we actually make the propagation of the macroalgae and put it out in the areas of spawning, and then we might create a habitat for the Baltic herring? And that's one way of solving a challenge, and see it as an opportunity instead of a cost or something that's not beneficial.
Is another way of solving the challenges this, which is a thought put to us from someone in the audience, should we be getting the industries using the marine space to pay to protect it? And how would that work?
Yeah, I can maybe pitch in there. I'm not an engineer, but I work at this tech company, Oceans of Energy. But I was the first to join, the founder and CEO, in 2016, because I am a marine scientist by background. And he was very keen on starting environmental monitoring from day one. So I think it is within the companies that develop these innovative solutions, it is also their responsibility to do their own monitoring, do their own research, trying to close knowledge gaps. Of course, you can never do it alone. We do it with lots of different partners. And on top of that, I think it also needs to be something that the government can regulate on. So it needs to come from both sides. And for the new wind park tenders, the government has also put down as a criteria that there needs to be environmental monitoring in place. And the wind park operators also need to allow access, because up till now, sometimes that's even an issue.
But can we always wait for governments to take the lead?
No, so you need to start yourself, and that's what we have done. And also because of that, I am also very delighted to see through the research that we have done that offshore solar supports biodiversity, and it can help restore nature. There's lots of cool research I can talk about, but if you're interested, come to me after the session.
I just wanted to pick up on your comment about is the regulation catching up fast enough, and it is not. But I think that's where actually industry gets together and they decide to create their own standards. So there are now so many very, very exciting initiatives around nature positivity and so on, where industry actually are taking sort of strides to kind of move this forward.
But how do they enforce these measures? Industries, I mean, governments have a hard time enough.
This is really where industry has realized that there is this nature crisis, and they have realized that they need to do something, and they believe that if they actually take measures now, it will give them a competitive advantage. So that is the move.
So we mentioned earlier data sharing. Someone's asking, data shareability is an important issue. Does DNV share their data freely?
Yes, but we don't actually sit with so much of our own data like the industry does. But we have, it is very important for us to set the standards for how data is shared, and so how it can be shared. And also we do have a huge data platform where we do have a kind of a safe space for sharing of data. So one actually knows for what purpose and so on that data can be shared.
I'd like to get back to you, Charlina, with just some of the work that the EU does, both internally and externally, regarding the sustainable multi-use of the ocean. What are one or two key lessons that can be shared with other countries, not necessarily in the EU, perhaps even outside the EU?
Yeah. No, thank you for this question, because we were probably one of the first. I don't want to be not humble, but really we had a lot of experience in maritime spatial planning. We decided to go wider. So now we have MSP Global, Maritime Spatial Planning stands for MSP. But we started quite long ago, after our first experiences, to share these experiences with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. And now this project actually helps building capacity, because one of the lessons learned is that you really need capacity, building capacity, in order to be able, its governance, its information behind, its legislative framework or regulatory framework. So this needs capacity building in the countries that want to go for this maritime spatial planning approach. So we went out, and it's one of the most successful projects, and it is part of the decade for science for the ocean. That is a UN kind of initiative. So that is one thing. Another thing is how we can use it, for example, for the implementation of the BBNJ, the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement. There we need to space marine protected areas. So again, you need this knowledge, these regulatory tools, and so on. So there is so much out there on which you can build, and once you have the knowledge and practice, it can really propagate on many occasions, not only in a certain country, in a certain region, but really wider. So we should not discover the wheel multiple times. So we are out there, and we are ready to continue our leadership in this respect. But I genuinely want to pass one message. We started with avoiding clashes territorially at sea. But now we have one big project which is related to the new College of Commissioners. We are developing European Ocean Pact. And what is important is that with this pact, we would like to avoid clashes between policy designs. So we want to bring all ocean-related policies with the single reference framework starting from the ocean itself. So contributions are open. So please, you are lovers of the Arctic Ocean. We are lovers of the Arctic Ocean as well. Contributions are welcome until the 17th of February. We have the call for evidence. Everybody is welcome to give us ideas on how to proceed.
You heard it first here. All right. Joël, someone's asking, part of the triple threat to the environment is pollution. So the question is, how does multi-use, particularly in the Baltic, which is one of the most polluted sea areas in the world, how will it help remove and reduce input of PCBs and dioxins from the various land and ship-based sources?
I don't know if multi-use can do that, or we as developing seaweed farming can do that in the Baltic Sea. We can do some measures with that. Part of our idea was to do seaweed farming so we can remove nutrients. It's a form of nutrient remediation from the Baltic Sea, and then we eat the nutrients. That's a very good way of taking care of nutrients. You can, of course, use some kind of seaweed species as a bioremediation tool or phytoremediation tool at the inlets or at the pollutant runoff places to clean the sea in one way or another. But we can't do this alone as a company. We try to find the solutions in the water that's easy to build, that can be produced locally. But then we also need collaboration from land, and we still have to work with pollution in other ways, by legislation, for example, or by regulations. So this is not something that we can do alone, but we can try to help with what we can. And that's more our take on the matter, in going into, okay, we have these problems that we have to solve. We try to use nature to solve it, or we build nature-inclusive designs in one way or another. And then we see where we are getting. And then we gather data, collaborate with the scientific community. It can be municipalities, it can be the government. It depends on who are the other private companies. It depends on who are the actors here. It has been really important for us to be transparent with what we do, and also share as much as possible, because we get a lot back as well. And the pillar of our company is all the science that has been done until this day. And we continue to work on that, and that's why what we want to contribute with back to the society as well. That what we are doing, we want to contribute back, because it's a thank you for the rest as well.
The importance of reciprocity.
Yeah.
Everything going two ways. Brigitte, a question for you again from the audience. Is there an example of how environmental monitoring data from the Dutch solar farm has impacted or changed their operations?
Yeah, cool question.
Easy one.
Thank you for that. So when we went to sea in 2019, I first had all kinds of different anti-fouling measures on the bottom of the floaters, because it's floating offshore solar and it's really floating on the sea surface, so it's not above the seawater. All kinds of eco-friendly methods, but also, you know, just the regular traditional anti-fouling measures. And then also on the platforms where we didn't do anything, we actually saw that we were, with these upside-down reefs, which they really are, that we were actually increasing local biodiversity. And that we saw actually fish also, horse mackerel fish, that you usually wouldn't see at this location. So we actually abandoned the thought that we should be doing anything about fouling, because we see that there's a lot of growth underneath our platforms, and especially blue mussel, thriving blue mussel in the North Sea. And the crazy and cool thing about it is that they fall out from the storms and through time, and they form natural mussel banks on the seabed, on the bare North Sea seabed. That, you know, there used to be oyster reefs, there used to be a lot more life because there was more hard substrate, but because of, yeah, a bit of destructive bottom trawling practices, it's kind of a desert now in the North Sea, and there's a lot of efforts to restore this reef function, and through the natural fallout of these mussel banks under the so-called, they're not really marine protected areas, I would say, but at the place where the floating islands are, you know, you cannot have any activities. So we are actually seeing that this could be a really opportunity and nature positive effect of offshore solar.
All right, so in our last 5 minutes, let me turn to you, Charlina, with your final thoughts and how you make sure that key institutions like the European Commission live up to people's aspirations and to their own commitments.
So this is what we will try with the European Ocean Pact. We are not there to instruct. We really want a co-creation. We want a harvesting of all the ideas possible. We will have European Ocean Days at the beginning of March. So anyone that wants to contribute is really welcome. So inclusiveness, listening to the wider range of stakeholders, and very importantly, to the young generation. So we will have a genuine youth dialogue on the European Ocean Pact on the 3rd of March, for example. Then we will have a day on the Mission Ocean for Horizon. So we want to first be enabler, be inclusive, and to meet the right balance between the various interests of the stakeholders, but never at the expense of the health of the ocean.
Thank you. Bente, as a forecaster, are we on the right path?
Well, one of the things that I experience in my work is this real sort of conundrum of competing priorities. So whether it's sustainable food, sustainable energy, global, local, nature, economic growth, and job creation. And as you say, forecasting, I just really want to bring back this thing around the importance of taking a holistic perspective, crawling out of our silos, basically, and look at this in a holistic way, and go beyond borders, basically.
You took the words out of my mouth. A holistic approach, Joel?
Yes.
Is that what's needed?
Yeah, that's what's needed. Yeah. And more trials and error, in a way. And a lot of laughter as well, I would say. That's really important as well. We have this huge polycrisis that's facing us. And it's not going to be easy to solve. We just have to try in one way or another to do it, and then try to have fun in the meantime, and be curious as well. We just reached out and started a company that many thought that sounded crazy, but here we are sitting today, and I hope that more people want to do the same journey as we do as well, going into this direction of unknowns, and start to build something new.
The exciting world of the unknown.
Yeah.
What can be done? Brigitte, talking to the younger Arctic leaders, how would you inspire them? What's important?
Yeah, I would say just go for it. Offshore solar, nobody thought it would be possible, but just try and go and do it. And I would like to invite the European Commission to set clear targets for offshore solar, because from the example of the Netherlands, we know targets work. And we also need, of course, policy to make sure that policies are not lagging behind the technological advances, because it goes fast sometimes. And the regulatory frameworks need to be in place, but we also need to invite governments to develop feed-in tariffs and maybe get revenue support schemes, so wind park operators, but also offshore solar operators are actually willing to innovate with this work. And I also would like to say that the time is now. Europe is still kind of in a front-running position on this. There's more than 10 technology developers for offshore solar. So this is also what was, of course, highlighted by the Draghi report a few months ago, is we need to keep this market here. It's really important, and we should not let this market also disappear to China. And China is rapidly coming up with offshore solar. They are planning gigawatts of offshore solar there. So the timing is now, I would say. And for the emerging leaders, just follow your dreams and just go do it.
Time is of the essence. We've got 50 seconds, but we've already wrapped up on this note. Careful long-term planning, but don't overthink it. Thanks so much for a great conversation. Thank you. Andreas.
Thank you very much indeed. Timing is on our side, so we have 30 seconds left. We can remain in silent here, or you can also think about the very important discussions we just heard. It seems like trust seems to be the theme of this year's Arctic Frontiers Conference, so trust me that we have an exciting program ahead. Trust us that the Edge, if you eat here, has very delicious food from the ocean also for you, and trust me that at 3:30 we start here again with the last big picture of today, beyond traditional security. So thank you very much for your trust, and see you later.
normale nordlendingen. Jeg føler liksom ikke helt at jeg stemmer helt med det. For det er ikke sånn her hår på skuldrene og et fest.
Hva faen?
Det har vært veldig trendy å si ja, vi hører på dere, kjempefint med ungdom, men så har de liksom ikke gjort noe. Det er ungdom som legger premissene.
Om 5 år, jeg vet ikke, det viktigste er jo fremtiden utdanning. Det blir jævla